He abandoned the crown and walked barefoot through deserts, forests, and burning roads to push his body to its limits. Starving for weeks, he trained his body and mind to withstand anything, because he wanted to gain godlike powers to save everyone. The story begins 2,500 years ago when a tribe called the Aryans moved into the lands by the Indus River at the foot of the Himalayas. They overcame the people who lived there and took control, and in time, that rule gave rise to many kingdoms across the region. Among those kingdoms was Kosala, which grew strong and kept pressuring the nearby Shakya kingdom, sending its forces to conquer it whenever it saw an opportunity. Whenever war broke out, people lost their lives, and it left their lands in ruins, while others were enslaved. Everyone was suffering as they lived miserable lives and were hoping someone would save them. Meanwhile, in a monk temple somewhere in the Himalayas, a grand monk named Asceta senses a powerful presence from the south and asks his disciple, Naradatta, to descend the mountain and head over there in search of a great man who is going to become the Chakravartin king. A few years later, King Suddhodana of the kingdom of Shakya heads into the forest for one of his regular hunting trips and witnesses a strange miracle where all the animals in the forest gather around him in peace and silence. Suddenly, a messenger arrives and tells him that the queen is calling for him, and they hurry back to the palace, where his wife, Queen Maya, tells him that she had a vision of a great elephant with 6 tusks entering her body. Hearing this, Suddhodana is pleased, and he tells her about the miracle he witnessed and says that he feels that every living being throughout the land has offered them its blessing, and then points at the river saying even though they usually face drought at this time of the year, there are no such signs this time around, and says that it must be because of the child who will soon be born to them. Meanwhile, outside the castle, a group of Shakya soldiers makes its way through the poverty-stricken streets of their homeland, leading a few prisoners along with them. Their march catches the eye of a young slave boy named Chapra, who tries to take a closer look but ends up bumping into local thugs. Noticing the valuable items in the basket he is carrying, the thugs demand that he hand them over if he wants them to let him go. Chapra quickly makes a run for it, forcing the thugs to chase him through the crowded streets until he slips into a narrow alley. Just as he stops to catch his breath, a small boy named Tata suddenly jumps over him and snatches the fabric he was carrying. Later, when Chapra tells his owner about what happened, the poor boy is whipped harshly. The moment his mother hears of it, she rushes in and begs the owner to punish her instead. The owner refuses, explaining that the woman is their merchandise, but decides to show a little mercy by giving the boy 3 days to get the missing fabric back, and warns him that if he fails, he will sell his mother off. Chapra cannot bear the thought of losing her, and while passing through the busy market, he sees the same fabric being sold in a shop and tries to steal it back and run away. Unfortunately, he is quickly caught and beaten pretty badly. After that, he stumbles down some steps and silently vows to do whatever it takes to stop the slave traders from selling his mother. Right then, the small thief from earlier, named Tata, appears on top of a wall with his friends, laughing at him. Chapra demands that he return the fabrics, but the boy only laughs louder and tells his friends to attack him. Chapra knocks some of them down, but they soon overwhelm him with their numbers and beat him to a pulp. Lying bruised and exhausted on the ground, he begs the boy to give the fabrics back, trying to explain the consequences. Soon after, Chapra regains consciousness inside a rundown shack and finds Tata there, who calls for his sister to treat his wounds. She arrives and gives Chapra a bitter medicine that they made by boiling whatever root they could find nearby. After that, Tata introduces himself and says that he has already sold the fabric he stole. Chapra immediately shouts in protest, but Tata's sister bluntly tells him that they survived by stealing from others and mocks him, saying he must have been daydreaming in the alley while his belongings were taken away. Chapra explains that he might never see his mother again because of that, which makes them feel sorry, and Tata offers to help him rescue his mother. Later that day, the slave traders lead the women away to sell them off alongside Chapra's mother. Just then, a tiger appears out of the jungle, killing both traders on the spot. It then turns its attention towards Chapra's mother, but before it can attack, Chapra rushes forward with stones in hand. However, before he can throw them, the tiger retreats into the bushes, where Tata's spirit leaves the animal and returns to his body. Surrounded by animals, the young boy stands smiling, and coincidentally, a passing monk named Naradatta sees this and wonders if the boy is the blessed one his teacher Asceta told him about. But before they can celebrate, the army of Kosala arrives to attack Kapilavastu, the capital of the Shakya kingdom. Again, Tata explains to Chapra that the kingdom of Kosala wants to expand into their land and realizes that the army will be passing through his village. thinking about his family, he panics and dashes off to reach the village in time. Kosala's army general seems to be a cruel and merciless man, who becomes delighted at the sight of killing, laughing like a madman. As Kosala's army makes its way through the village, the young boy runs desperately to find his mother and sister, only to find them dead. Stricken with grief, the boy swears revenge, and Chapra promises to stand by him. Later that night, when Kosala's army sets up camp to celebrate before heading to the capital, Chapra and Tata secretly watch them from a distance, frustrated by how difficult it is to reach the general. Then Tata quietly tells Chapra his plan and puts his spirit into a horse in Kosala's army, and uses it to cause a commotion. Chapra seizes the moment and jumps onto the possessed horse to get near the general before taking aim with some arrows and throwing them at the general. But the general turns his head at the last moment and narrowly escapes death. In moments, Chapra and the horse find themselves surrounded by spearmen. But before they can strike, a swarm of locusts suddenly hits the camp, throwing the army into chaos. Seizing the chance, Tata and Chapra chase the general to a river, where the general slips into the water. His luck turns around as hungry crocodiles close in, surrounding him as he struggles to stay afloat. Chapra moves quickly to finish him with an arrow to avenge Tata's family, but then he hesitates, wondering if he wants to stay a slave all his life. The general, panicked and desperate, calls out, offering all his wealth in exchange for saving his life. Ignoring Tata's angry protests, Chapra kills the crocodiles one by one and then dives in and pulls the general to safety. He turns to Tata with an apology, explaining that this man could be the key to rising in Kosala's ranks. Calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity granted by the heavens, Chapra lays out his plan to gain influence in the army and insists it is the only way for slaves like them to escape their hard lives. Against his better judgment, Tata reluctantly agrees. The next day, a soldier rushes in to tell King Siddhartha that the Kosala army has slipped away from the Rohini River overnight after losing most of their supplies to a swarm of locusts, and that General Budai is now reported missing. King Siddhartha smiles in relief as the Shakya soldiers begin to cheer, after which the king walks to his wife, Maya, and says she can safely return to her homeland to give birth. At the same time, Tata and Chapra arrive at the Kosala base camp. Chapra thanks Tata for agreeing to his selfish request before asking him to return and tell his mother that he will come for her one day. As Tata departs, Chapra carries General Budai into the camp, where the Kosala soldiers rush to him, calling for medics. He then collapses, acting exhausted as if he carried the general all the way, letting the scene play out as he planned. When the general regains consciousness, he calls for the boy and asks how he can repay him, to which Chapra merely tells him to rest well. The general then offers to adopt him and gives him a place in his service, and Chapra accepts without hesitation. The scene then shifts back to the Shakya kingdom, where Queen Maya is being escorted to her homeland. Her guards set up a camp near the Rohini River, since they must cross it to get there. Every soldier is ordered to protect the queen at all costs. At dawn, as the sun rises, animals gather beneath a tree, and it becomes clear the heir is born. The queen tells her child that the whole world is offering its blessing, but soon her health begins to fail. The escorts rush her and the newborn back to the castle, where King Siddhartha hurries to meet them. Maya asks the king to see the baby and requests that he name the boy Siddhartha. The king smiles and says that it's a strong name, revealing its meaning as the one who has accomplished his goals. As her strength fades, Maya holds the baby and caresses his face before passing away, leaving him in his father's care. A short while later, the great monk Asita arrives to see the child. The moment he lays eyes on the infant, the monk is struck with awe, noting that the baby, pointing one finger to the sky and one to the ground, shows that he has no equal on earth or in the heavens. He prophesies that the boy will grow to become a Chakravartin king, though by that time he himself will no longer be alive to witness it. 10 years pass by, and we see a group of local dancers trying to entertain Siddhartha, but he gets bored and leaves his room. Meanwhile, 2 royal servants, Vizier and Gautami, come searching for him because his father wishes to see him. The boy speaks up from behind the tree and asks them again about the 4 caste system. The 2 repeat the lesson, explaining that the highest caste is called Brahmins, which includes monks who pray for prosperity. The prince, however, thinks it's laughable that a nation could thrive only through monks' prayers. They try to persuade him that both he and his father, the king, are bound to obey the Brahmins, and then go on to say that next are the Kshatriyas, which includes great warriors and nobles like him. They then explain that below the nobles are the commoners and merchants, known as the Vaishyas, and at the very bottom are the Shudras, which include the slaves and manual laborers. Siddhartha questions this nonsense, asking why the slaves are placed at the bottom, but the two quickly escort him to the king. At the throne, a warrior named Bandaka is being praised for his work in Magadha, and the king urges him to keep working for the nation's prosperity as he appoints him the new general. When Siddhartha arrives, his father introduces the prince to the new general, saying Bandaka is a master archer. Over these 10 years, Kosala has reigned supreme, crushing hostile neighbors with decisive victories, and now, as the army returns from its latest win, soldiers and citizens shout Chapra's name, hailing him with respect. Everyone knows General Budai has taken him in as his son, and word has spread across the ranks that Chapra is now the chosen heir to the general's legacy. Riding through the crowd, Chapra smiles at how far he has climbed. Back in Shakya, a monk is teaching the Kshatriya children, telling them they must grow into fine warriors capable of defeating the Kosala army. Among them, Siddhartha rises and asks what happens to the dead after their funeral, but the teacher gets irritated and tells him to sit down and stop wasting time. The prince's friends argue with him that the old man's lectures are boring and they make him skip class. The little group slips into the forest, where Siddhartha admits that he has never stepped outside the palace before. Just then, the two friends spot a rabbit and chase it, but when one of them aims with an arrow, Siddhartha leaps on him, letting the rabbit escape. The two boys run off after it again while the prince stays behind, looking gloomy because he can't stand anyone hurting a living thing. Wandering alone, he soon loses his way and finds himself in a bright clearing where a dark-skinned monk is playing a musical instrument, and Siddhartha sits before the man, wondering if this is all just a dream. Meanwhile, Jathaka gets stuck in sinking mud and cries for help. Siddhartha and the other boy try to pull him out using a tree, but the boy can only grab onto the weak end, which snaps as soon as he grabs it, and he sinks deeper until his life slips away. Overcome with grief, the prince runs to his stepmother, and she embraces him, relieved that he is safe. But when he cries out that Jathaka has died, he falls ill with sadness. She urges him to rest, then goes to the king, blaming herself for the tragedy. But the king tells her the boy's weakness comes from his birth mother, Maya, and assures her she has cared for him well. He then declares that now that the boy has reached the age of 10, it's time to start his martial arts training. The next day, while Siddhartha is peacefully sitting and playing with a butterfly, an arrow suddenly kills the butterfly, shocking and angering the prince as his father's general Bandaka appears, followed closely by the king, who informs the boy that this man will be his martial arts trainer from today onward. Suddhodana instructs Bandaka not to go easy on him just because he's a prince, and the general gladly agrees. Later, when Bandaka takes Siddhartha to train with a bow and demonstrates his skill with a few perfect shots. But when the prince is asked to try, he can barely shoot as he struggles with the bow. During another training session, soldiers notice that General Bandaka is pushing the young prince to his limits, even though he is still only 10 years old, repeatedly attacking him to force him to defend himself. As the training continues, the general takes Siddhartha horse riding and begins shooting down animals simply for amusement, which prompts the boy to ask him to stop. Bandaka responds by telling him to stop being weak, then runs after a deer while the prince follows, begging him to leave it alone. When Bandaka tries to take a perfect shot, Siddhartha deliberately shoots himself to throw him off, allowing the deer to escape. Bandaka then tells the boy that a nation's king must be strong and has no need for kindness before ending the session for the day. Just like that, 5 years pass by, and in the bustling city of Savatthi within the Kosala kingdom, the crowd cheers as Chapra stands in the arena, fighting a fierce opponent. His every move is precise and unyielding, drawing the attention of a noble lady who can't hide her admiration as he defeats the challenger with ease. He wins one contest after another, and though at times it seems as if the tide might turn against him, the lady's concern only fuels him until victory is once again his. Later that day, General Budhai meets Chapra and offers his congratulations, telling him that with one more win in tomorrow's final match, the king's trophy will be his, alongside the title of the hero of people. Chapra waves his head, sure of victory, and vows not to bring shame to his name. In that moment, the noble lady from earlier steps in and offers him a flower with her hopes and prayers for his victory. Once she leaves, the general reveals that she is the vizier's daughter, Lady Malika. Holding the flower, Chapra feels as though he can already taste victory. The following day, Lord Chapra enters the arena to thunderous chants and faces his final opponent, Lord Bindika, the eldest son of a noble family. At the host's signal, both warriors charge at each other and clash their swords. Chapra seems at a clear disadvantage given his small size, as all of his strikes get deflected by Bindika, who eventually pushes him off his horse. However, Chapra doesn't give up here and tries to jump at him, but Bindika moves his horse around and kicks him back on the ground. After that, he rides forward with his blade pointed at the boy, but Chapra dodges it at the last moment by jumping high and grabs his saddle. He then gets behind Bindika and pulls him off the horse by choking him, and both warriors end up falling on the ground. Seeing this, Malika runs away with tears in her eyes while the crowd urges the fighters to stand up. Chapra gets up and tries to land a flying punch, but Bindika knocks him back with his strong arms. He then tries to crush him by jumping over the boy, but Chapra barely dodges it by rolling sideways. Bindika then gets up and manages to knock Chapra out with a punch to his face, and then picks him up from his head and starts brutally punching him down. After that, he raises his fists in celebration, but Chapra gets back up on his feet and tells him that it's not over yet. Seeing this, Bindika grabs his sword and tries to cut him down, but Chapra dodges away and grabs some rocks to knock the sword out of Bindika's hand by throwing them. After that, he quickly grabs his sword and points it at his face before knocking him out using the sword's hilt to break some of his teeth. With that, he declares his victory and earns the title of Hero of the People alongside the king's trophy. Later that day, Lady Malika personally tends to Chapra's injuries, as he asks her to be gentle, while she confesses how agonizing it was to watch the entire match. Meanwhile, the vizier drinks with General Budhai and expresses his wish for Chapra to marry his daughter. General Budhai happily accepts the proposal, considering it a great honor for their families. But then Vizier brings up a troubling question, asking if Chapra is truly the son of his deceased older sister, which catches the general off guard, and he fears the truth will come out. Budhai recalls the night when a low-caste boy saved his life and summons Chapra in secret late at night, warning him that if anyone found out that he was born a Shudra, it would bring doom upon them both, urging him to keep the secret at all costs, then leaving him with the warning. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom of Shakya, Siddhartha has grown into a fine young prince. He impresses General Bandaka in practice, and the Shakya soldiers watch in admiration at how quickly he has grown. King Siddhartha feels proud to see his son grow so strong, even though he is 15, and the general also approves of Siddhartha's progress. Later that evening, the prince slips away as usual, with royal guards following to bring him back, but Siddhartha easily outpaces them and escapes. As he rides his horse swiftly through the city, he comes across a grieving couple mourning the loss of their child. Soon, more men come out, saying they are outcasts due to disease, begging Siddhartha for money. Without hesitation, Siddhartha removes his silk clothes and valuable ornaments, tossing them aside as the slum dwellers scramble to grab them. Just then, some local thugs arrive to seize the treasures, kicking the sick outcasts aside and arguing that dying people have no use for such valuables as they steal everything for themselves. After looting the outcasts, the thugs turn their greedy eyes toward Siddhartha, but before they can touch the boy, a woman arrives at the scene and commands them to leave him alone. The thugs call her their sister and complain as she warns them that if any of them hurts the boy, they will all be beheaded. Though confused, the thugs reluctantly obey her orders and back away. After they leave, the woman also heads in the other direction and tells him to return since everyone is looking for him, but Siddhartha tries to stop her. She stops and says her name is Megala and advises the prince against giving his things to the outcasts. She says that these are all half-dead people who were abandoned by their families and are now waiting for death to come and take their lives. She tells him he can't understand life outside the castle, which makes Siddhartha angry, and he asks if she knows the world he doesn't. The next day, Megala takes the prince around the town, where Siddhartha gets sad when he sees what people eat. Megala pushes him away, but the prince keeps stopping when he sees people in bad shape. Megala asks the prince why he's so drawn to all this, but before he can reply, the prince witnesses a slave being beaten badly for trying to steal a fruit and running off. The prince cries as he realizes what his people are going through, but Megala explains that everyone is going to die one day, and they are all humans, no matter their caste or status. Later that day, the prince couldn't focus on training and left early. He calls it a beautiful day and rides to see Megala. They visit the town and watch everything from a boat. Megala asks Siddhartha if it is okay for him to be with her like this, since normally she wouldn't be allowed to talk to him. Hearing this, the prince reminds her about what she said about both of them being humans. Hearing that, Megala pushes him into the water, asking him to swim with her while General Bandaka watches all of this with an evil smirk. Later, the prince gets called into an audience with the king, and he gets scolded when the king asks if he was spending time with a lowly commoner. The prince is disgusted when he hears Siddhartha call Megala a lowly commoner and shouts in protest, but the king shouts back at him, saying he is the future of the kingdom and must make the nation strong. The king leaves as he forbids the prince from leaving the castle, while General Bandaka eavesdrops and smirks happily. Later that evening, while Megala is admiring the beauty of the river, the general shows up and has his men arrest her and has her tied to a cross for execution. While she shouts Siddhartha's name, he tries his best to break free from the guards to reach his father and stop the execution. Siddhartha breaks free and comes after his father, demanding to know why he arrested Megala. The king says that he is in a meeting, but the prince simply shouts at him to release her at once. The king asks if he is talking about the female bandit, and Siddhartha makes it clear that he will never forgive him if he kills her. As the king refuses, the prince draws his blade in front of everyone, asking the king if he finds being in love so disgraceful. The king turns his face as he reminds the young prince of his princely duties towards the country, but the prince keeps asking him to spare Megala. Seeing his son filled with hatred toward him, Siddhartha agrees to his request to release the bandit on the condition that he marry Princess Yasudhara of the neighboring country. Hearing that, the prince feels disgusted, but as the crowd shouts to kill Megala, he calms himself and accepts the proposal under pressure. However, General Bandaka uses a red-hot blade and burns both of her eyes, and when Siddhartha shouts and asks what he has done, Bandaka says he blinded her eyes so she could never look at him again. Megala tells the prince to stop worrying about this, and as she is getting taken away, she shouts at Siddhartha, saying his face is burned into her eyes for the rest of her life, and tells him how glad she was to meet him and enjoy their little time together. She asks him to become a great king and is taken away while the prince cries. Soon after, the prince gets wed to Princess Yasudhara, and everyone looks happy except for the prince. King Suddhodana declares to his son that at the time he was born, the great monk Asita gave them a prophecy that he would become the great Chakravartin king. In the meantime, the young boy Tata, who is apparently still a kid, arrives with Chapra's mother and the monk Naradatta in the kingdom of Kosala. Tata argues that Chapra should be somewhere here, and just as they look around, the crowd shouts that the general is arriving. Tata jumps up on someone and finds out that the one being hailed as the general is Chapra himself. Chapra's mother gets all sad and nostalgic, and Tata gets excited, asking to visit the general's palace. Chapra's mother, however, says that seeing her child was enough for her. Later, Chapra urges the Kosala leaders and says that they should attack the kingdom of Shakya again and claim their fertile lands for themselves. Everyone approves of the idea and begins to get ready while a messenger conveys news of the war to Shakya. King Suddhodana tells Siddhartha that their country is a small one, and it was a miracle that they avoided war for this long. But now it appears unavoidable. When Siddhartha shows some resistance, saying he hates bloodshed, his father shouts at him, trying to make him understand that if they back down, their kingdom will get overrun by Kosala. But when the prince doesn't get any of that, the king leaves, saying he can never become a king with such an attitude. Sometime later, the Kosala army meets with the Shakya forces near a border village. Chapra leads the attack, and Prince Siddhartha is sick of the war. General Bandaka joins him and says that he can stay back and watch his men fall from up there. Just then, one of his men delivers a pot of deadly poison to him. Bandaka dips his arrows in it and says that no soldier can live if he's hit with it. The Prince Siddhartha asks the general if he gets amused over the sight of people dying, and the general says yes, like a bloodthirsty maniac. As the general leaves to turn the tide of the war, he mocks the prince, saying a coward like him could never understand. As the battle rages on, Chapra goes on a rampage, while Prince Siddhartha enters the battlefield. Both General Bandaka and Chapra take down a significant number of soldiers, while Prince Siddhartha rides around shouting for everyone to stop. Just then, some enemy soldiers spot him, and when Chapra hears that the prince is near, he quickly races toward him. Meanwhile, Siddhartha gets surrounded by enemy soldiers as his own die protecting him. General Bandaka sees Chapra heading toward the prince and goes after him. He takes a shot at Chapra but fails and acknowledges the strength of the Kosala hero and says that he cannot outsmart him with ordinary tactics, and comes up with a wicked idea. He picks up an enemy corpse and puts it in front of him while riding past Chapra, pretending to be an ally. Once he gets ahead of him, Bandaka turns his horse around towards Chapra and shoots him with a poisonous arrow. But instead of falling down, Chapra yanks it out and strikes back, knocking Bandaka off his horse. After that, he heads straight for Siddhartha, while Bandaka wonders why his poison isn't working. Chapra charges at Siddhartha at full speed, but at the very last moment, Siddhartha looks at him with eyes full of pity, with a majestic aura around him. Then Bandaka's poison kicks in and makes Chapra miss his attack. As he falls off his horse, he thinks about the divine presence he felt and how Siddhartha's eyes pierced into his soul, making him wonder if he is going to die while still holding his regrets. Seeing Chapra fall to the ground, shaking from the poison, Bandaka loudly brags that he is the one who took down the enemy general before ordering his army to crush the enemy. With that, both armies retreat, leaving only death and suffering. Back at Budhai's home in Kosala, the priest says the poison has spread through Chapra's body, and he can't be saved. Just then, Malika and her father arrive to ask about Chapra, and Budhai replies that it would be a miracle if he lives until tomorrow. Hearing that, a squirrel possessed by Tata races to the slums, where he returns to his body and tells his mother that Chapra cannot be saved, which makes her panic and try to run out to see him before it's too late. But Naradata steps in and says his master might know of a cure. Since Tata can fly to the Himalayas in a single night using his powers, he offers to deliver the message. Naradata prepares a letter and wishes Tata good luck. By possessing many animals, he runs for miles and soars into the sky, and finally reaches the monk temple, where everyone is shocked as he flies in and lands before Master Asita with the letter. The old monk is stunned when he reads it and walks to the edge of the hill outside and sends a spiritual message directly to Naradata using his powers. He scolds him for wasting the lives of so many animals just to save a boy, but Naradata stands firm, saying he has to save Chapra no matter what. Hearing this, Master Asita warns him that he will become a wild animal for the rest of his life as punishment and tells him about the cure. Naradata quickly shouts the antidote recipe to Chapra's mother before losing his mind and running off to the wilderness like a dog. She tears up seeing this, but is relieved to know that Chapra will survive. Later at Budhai's place, Chapra's mother begs Budhai to give the cure to Chapra. He agrees, and right after they give it to him, the doctor is amazed to see Chapra open his eyes. At the same time, Siddhartha's wife asks him if he isn't sleeping because something is troubling him, so he tells her he feels terrible to see people get sick and die every day, while he's doing nothing about it. He wonders if there is anything he can do to help and whether he should just ignore it all. He stands up and says he did not even realize how full of suffering life is due to his lavish upbringing as a prince, while even the Shudras know more about the world than him. He says he is determined to discover the truth of the world and then tells her not to worry and to go to sleep. Back at Budhai's mansion, Chapra's mother is locked in the basement while Budhai tells him that Lady Malika came to see him. Then, when he is alone with Chapra, he reminds the boy to stick to the story that he is the son of Lord Budhai and to erase all memories of his peasant life. Hearing this, Chapra becomes suspicious and wonders why he brought this up right now. But when he overhears Budhai telling his servants not to mention the woman who brought the antidote, he realizes something is off. In the basement, two men prepare to execute Chapra's mother, but Chapra jumps down and knocks the fat one down before telling the skinny one to keep his hands off his mother. Hearing that, the men are stunned that Lord Chapra calls a peasant his mother. But before they can tell this to anyone else, Chapra quickly draws his sword and silences them. After that, his mother hugs him and says he has grown up a lot. But during their wholesome reunion, Chapra notices the fat man trying to escape and fails to stop him. He tries to chase after him, but his wounds open up, and his mother has to carry him up the stairs. By the time they reach the top, Budhai's men surround them and accuse Chapra of hiding that he was a Shudra, while Budhai calls him a fool in disappointment. The next day in court, the judge asks Budhai if he truly didn't know Chapra was a Shudra when he adopted him, and the general lies without hesitation, causing an uproar. After that, the guards drag Chapra's mother forward and throw her to the floor in front of the judge, who asks if she is really his mother. While Chapra tries to push through the guards in rage, she denies the claim and says she once found the boy on a battlefield, so he is not the son of a Shudra like her. The judge asks if she's lying, but Chapra's mother repeats that he is not her child, which breaks the boy's heart. At that moment, Chapra tells her she doesn't need to lie anymore and says he is glad he no longer has to live in fear of being exposed. Then, the judge asks if he just admitted to being a Shudra, and he proudly confirms it before wrapping his arms tightly around his mother. The judge is shocked that the boy threw away his noble status so casually and says he should be ashamed of his blood. but Chapra says he only became noble to stop being treated like trash in the streets. With that, the judge announces that General Budhai will be placed under house arrest, while Chapra is to be exiled from Kosala, so his mother smiles gently and says goodbye. However, the judge then sentences his mother to death as an example, which causes Chapra to explode with rage. He yells that it is unfair and insists she never did anything wrong, even falling to his knees and begging them to exile her with him instead. His mother hugs him and says it is all right, but he cries that living like a peasant means nothing without her, and pleads with the judge to execute him too. The next day, a large crowd gathers to watch as Chapra and his mother walk through the city. Tada notices what is happening and starts following them up the mountain. At the top, the captain loudly declares that filthy Shudras deserve to be punished for wasting oxygen with every breath, and then orders his men to throw them off the cliff. But Tada suddenly shouts and distracts them, yelling for the mother and son to run away. However, one soldier immediately hurls a spear and impales them both. After flashing each other a final smile, they fall to their deaths. Deep in the valley, even after losing his sanity, Naradatta mourns the death of the mother and son he turned into a senseless beast for, while Tada runs away in tears. Meanwhile, back at the kingdom of Shakya, Siddhartha's wife gives birth to their baby, and everyone is happy to see a new prince come into the world. At the same time, Siddhartha walks out of the palace, now looking like an overworked father, thinking that even though he keeps learning every day, he doesn't feel like he's getting close to the truth he's searching for. He feels at a loss, realizing everyone is bound to suffer no matter what, and struggles with finding a way to help others. So now he looks for a way to accept that truth without falling apart. Later, as he meditates under the shade of a huge tree, he finally decides to let go of everything to find his answer. One night, Siddhartha watches his father sleeping peacefully and apologizes for breaking his trust by leaving. With that, he rides into the forest, but after some time, one of his servants runs after him and requests that he come back. Siddhartha tells the man to calm down and take the horse back home. Next, the man watches in disbelief as the prince takes off his luxurious clothes and jewelry and tells him to take them all to the queen. The man nervously asks what he plans to do now, and Siddhartha leaves him absolutely stunned by grabbing a blade and shaving off all his hair until he looks like a hard-boiled egg. He hands it over to the man and says to give it to his wife, along with the message that he will return after he finds the truth he is looking for. Back at the mansion, the queen holds his belongings with tears in her eyes, while the princess cries as she holds his hair. Just then, a messenger arrives and announces that the kingdom of Kosala is attacking now. At that moment, the king summons Bandaka and tells him to take command. But Bandaka turns against him and says he will only do that on the condition that he names him the next king. The king then tries to lecture him, but Bandaka points his sword at him and makes it clear that he will take his life if he doesn't accept, and forces him to make him the next king of Shakya. On the battlefield, Kosala's massive army advances forward while Bandaka leads the Shakya forces as the new king. Under the new king's command, the archers rain arrows on their enemy and cut down the foot soldiers while Bandaka goes in and drops men left and right. Then, the Kosala soldiers charge in with their elephants and force him to retreat, but Bandaka cuts through their arrows and even reflects them back before jumping over the elephants on his horse and swiftly ending them. He flexes on his enemies and mocks them for being weak before cutting down another soldier, and laughs while yelling that from now on, they'd better remember the name of their new king. Just then, a spear flies straight into his mouth and pierces him to death, marking the end of the war. Sometime later, Siddhartha walks through the mountain of bodies while feeling deeply sad about everyone's tragic fate, and gently closes Bandaka's eyes. After that, he claps his hands for the first time in his life and prays with all his heart for the poor souls who were lost, then walks away from the kingdom he once called home. Meanwhile, Naradatta continues living in the forest like an animal, and Meghala and Tada each follow their own road as well. Siddhartha begins his journey to discover the one true path, while his mother watches over him from the heavens. Many years later, on a dark night, a gang of bandits ambushes a fat merchant and his camp. The terrified men flee while the gang's leader, who turns out to be a fully grown-up Tada, laughs at the cowards. Just then, Tada's men call him over after discovering the merchant's valuable goods. Meghala is also part of his gang, and she suggests that they bring the loot to the nearby village where they are staying, since Kosala is about to attack the kingdom of Shakya again. Remembering what Kosala did to his best friend, Tada swears he will make them pay for their crimes. Just then, he notices someone sitting on a rock and finds out that it's just a monk. Tada asks him if he knows the prince of the kingdom of Shakya named Siddhartha, who left everything and became a monk. Tada says that Siddhartha was a fool for walking away from a life of luxury. But this makes the monk annoyed and explains that ascetic monks don't harm themselves for no reason. They do it to gain merit for the next life. Hearing this, Tada just laughs at him, and Megala jokes that she would make a perfect ascetic monk since her entire life has been nothing but suffering. After that, she challenges the monk and says that if he really believes his purpose in life is to suffer, then he should burn his eyes like hers to prove it. Hearing that, the monk grabs a torch and drops to his knees, and without any hesitation, shoves the burning torch straight into his eye socket. The next day, a hunter notices that Siddhartha has hair too long for a monk and offers him a razor and even invites him home to tidy up. Back at his house, he hands Siddhartha a new robe, saying it's all he can offer. Just then, another monk with a burned eye arrives, asking for water. Siddhartha introduces himself, while the monk wonders if he is the Shakya prince he heard about, and then introduces himself as Depa. After that, the hunter returns, saying his eldest child, Asaji, wants to become a monk too, and asks them to take him as a disciple. Siddhartha says he is not taking any disciples right now, and Depa points out that his family probably just wants fewer mouths to feed. As they leave, Depa notices Siddhartha staring at him and explains that he burned his eye to prove how serious he is to some doubters. He also mentions that his master Naradatta gave up everything and became a beast to live a pure life without desire. Depa says he believes in asceticism, which means that the more he suffers now, the better his next life will be. After that, they decide to head to the ascetic forest, and on their way, they notice the Asagil following them through the pouring rain. And at one point, when he cuts himself with a poisonous plant and nearly drowns, Siddhartha turns around and pulls him out. As they walk through the river, Depa tells Siddhartha to leave the kid since he will not make it. But Siddhartha keeps carrying him all the way to the desert. There, they run into some Kosala soldiers who were out hunting with their young prince. After finishing off a deer, they get close to the monks, and the young prince feels something special about Siddhartha's gaze. But then he turns around, thinking they are just regular monks. Once they leave, Depa explains that the brat is actually Kosala's prince, named Viradhaka, who was born from the Kosalan king and a slave woman from Shakya, because the Shakya king tricked him by presenting the slave as a noble. After that, the monks travel for days through blistering heat and dense mountain forests, until one night, when Tada and his men spot them from a distance and stop by to ask Depa how he was doing. Depa silently stares back, but Siddhartha tells Tada that the boy with them is in bad shape and needs treatment now. Hearing this, Tada leads them to his camp, where he brews a herbal medicine for Asaji. Tada explains that it's made with a few herbs he had on hand, and that if he still had his powers, he would have gathered more by possessing a bird. Siddhartha is surprised to learn that he could possess animals, and Depa recalls his master Naradatta once mentioning a special boy with the same name who could possess animals but never aged. Tada explains that after he lost his powers, he suddenly grew up and became like this. Looking at Asaji's poor condition, Siddhartha asks Tada to bring a hot knife because he wants to cut the swollen leg and suck out the poison. After treating the boy, Tada brings over the knife to close the wound by burning it, and has a seizure from the pain. Right then, his heart stops, and his spirit drifts to a strange realm where Siddhartha's mother appears and tells him that he is not destined to die yet, and he has to follow Siddhartha on his journey until his last day comes. Back in the tent, Siddhartha performs chest compressions until his heart starts again. Just then, Megala enters the tent with some firewood to ask Tada who the visitors are. Seeing her, Siddhartha calls her name, and she drops the wood the instant she recognizes his voice. As the two stand there shaking, her voice trembles while she asks why he is there, and Siddhartha apologizes that he couldn't become the great king she hoped for, and in frustration, she runs out of the tent. Meanwhile, both Tada and Depa are surprised to learn that Siddhartha is the missing prince. Then Tada tells him that he has been looking for him because Kosala soldiers murdered his mother and sister, which is why he hates them so much. But because he lacks status, he needs a king's help to start a war. After venting all his anger out, Tada asks Siddhartha to become king and take revenge for him. But Siddhartha tells Tada to wait 10 years while he seeks meaning as a monk, and promises to return to his kingdom if he fails to find the answers he seeks. The next morning, Asaji suddenly wakes up from a nightmare and says a tornado is coming. As the little boy runs into the village to warn everyone, Tada and the others doubt his claim. But Asaji continues sprinting through the settlement, yelling for everyone to evacuate right away. Suddenly, a tornado appears out of nowhere and moves toward the houses, destroying everything in its path without mercy. Assaji saves a boy and takes shelter as it passes. When it's over, Siddhartha and the others are shocked that a tornado really appeared. After some time, not far away in the kingdom of Magadha, the king welcomes Assaji in his court. Assaji asks the king what he wishes to know, and when the king asks what his future holds, the boy says death. Everyone erupts and yells at the boy, but the king silences them and asks who will kill him. Assaji innocently states that his son will attack him in 30 years and face divine punishment for it right after as well. Hearing that, the king smugly tells Assaji he also got a prophecy saying he will die when he counts to 3, but the boy continues smiling and dances around goofily. As the king counts to 3, Assaji calls a guard over, and when the count hits 3, a snake drops from above. However, everyone is shocked when the guard's spear pierces the snake, and the boy is unharmed. Seeing that, the king realizes Assaji can really see the future, and the boy says it isn't time for him to die yet. After that, he smiles and reveals that he will die in 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days. The king asks him to stay as his advisor, but the boy refuses, saying his purpose is to follow Siddhartha until the day he dies. The king is surprised to hear that, and asks where Siddhartha is, and Assaji tells him that he is currently on the Pandava mountains on his way to the ascetic forest. That night, the king takes an army with him and climbs up the mountain, where he finds Depa meditating while hanging upside down. The king asks him if he is Siddhartha, but Depa points him to Siddhartha, who's calmly meditating on the side. After greeting Siddhartha, the king kneels and asks him to come to his kingdom as his advisor, and even offers half his kingdom in return. But Siddhartha tells him he will suffer if greed overtakes him and he wants for more than what he needs, and that is why he became a monk. Hearing that, the king grows sad as he shares that death is inevitable, but he was told that his own son will take his life in 30 years. Being afraid of death, he believes Siddhartha can save him from that fate, but Siddhartha shakes his head and makes it clear he cannot cure his fear of death at the moment. However, he hopes to find an escape from that fear during his journey to the ascetic forest. His answer satisfies the king, and the man wishes him luck. After that, Assaji and the 2 monks travel for days through harsh wilderness, helping others and meditating every single day till they arrive at the forest of ascetic monks. As soon as Depa enters the forest, he becomes very excited, and when Assaji walks up to a beautiful pond, he is absolutely terrified as a man comes out staring him down. Then, Depa explains that holding one's breath underwater, hanging from a tree, and burying oneself alive, as well as solitary confinement in a casket, is the peak of ascetic training. After that, Siddhartha begins his training by meditating on thorns, at night among wolves, and even in thunderstorms, hoping this suffering will lead to enlightenment. A few months pass by, and one day he asks Assaji why he is marking the tree, and the boy explains with a smile that he marks every day of the year on a tree, and by the 5th tree, he will die. Siddhartha calls that crazy and asks him if he is not scared of death, to which the boy says he is, but he has no control over it. Hearing that, Siddhartha is impressed and asks him how he lives every day fearlessly, and the boy says his purpose in life keeps him going, just like Siddhartha's purpose is to be reborn as something greater than human and save everyone. But when he asks how he can save everyone, Assaji quietly smiles. As the years pass, Siddhartha continues his ascetic training until one day he screams while buried under hot sand, and Depa lectures him that the pain will lead him to salvation. And when Siddhartha asks the mad monk if he's telling him to die, Depa confirms it, saying their purpose is to be free of their corrupt human body. Siddhartha is shocked on hearing that and tells the monk he doesn't want to die. But the crazy monk gets angry and orders him to train until he drops dead. Later, Siddhartha wonders if torturing himself is really the way to save humanity, while his body withers away. One day, Tada shows up and finds Siddhartha almost dead, still buried under the sand. He digs him out and takes him to a nearby river and splashes him with water. When Siddhartha wakes up, Tada tells him that he can't see him die from some stupid training. After that, he sits him in the shade of a tree and gives him a fruit, but Siddhartha refuses it because he is fasting. Tada tells him to eat it anyways, but then Depa and the other ascetic monks show up and tell him to stop interrupting his training and to go away. Just then, Tada notices some smoke coming from his shack and runs to it worried about Megala, and finds a gang of scrawny monks with torches calling her a traitor and burning the shack down. Tada slaps them away and rushes in, and quickly grabs Megala and hauls her out of there right before the shack is destroyed. Later that night, Siddhartha visits him to ask if he and Megala are alright, and Tata tells him that she is so sick she can't even move or talk to him, even though they came all this way to save him. Hearing that, Siddhartha feels terrible, and he goes inside even though Megala begs him to stay away. After seeing her horrible condition, he falls to his knees and prays for her. The next day, Depa tells him to concentrate during his training as he notices that Siddhartha can't stop thinking about her. Siddhartha tells him he can't handle seeing her suffer, and Depa says it is embarrassing for a believer of asceticism to be scared of his pain, but Siddhartha argues no monk in the forest has gone through the pain she is suffering. Meanwhile, Tata brings Megala some food, but she refuses it. She tells him to leave her because there is no hope for her, and he will be free once she passes away. Hearing that, Tata hugs her and promises he will find a way to save her, while Siddhartha quietly watches them from outside. The next day, Asaji opens Siddhartha's casket, and he asks the boy if there really is no way to save Megala, but Asaji tells him he can save her the same way he did when he was sick, by sucking out the poison. As soon as Siddhartha hears that, he rushes over that night and starts sucking the poison, which makes Tata worry he will catch the disease himself, but Siddhartha keeps going the entire night until he gets every bit of it out. The next morning, he skips his training and heads out to check on Megala, which makes Depa furious. Back at the cave, Siddhartha finds her full recovered. While Megala cries and Tata thanks him, Depa and the other monks suddenly appear and announce that they have had enough of Siddhartha's disrespect, and tell him to leave. However, Tata cuts in and declares that they will leave instead, and tells Siddhartha that he will no longer wait for him to return and become king for his revenge, so that Siddhartha can continue his training in peace. He says that his anger went away when he saw Megala recovering, and now he understands that Siddhartha's goal is far more important. Megala tells Siddhartha that she is glad she fell in love with him, even if it cost her her eyes, because he saved both her body and heart, and with that both of them head off, while Tata tells Siddhartha to become a great monk and make him his first disciple. That night, at the border of the kingdom of Shakya, the soldiers are shocked to see dozens of tents destroyed in seconds by an army of elephants trampling through everything, followed by wave after wave of Kosala's foot soldiers. The young prince has his elephants bash into the gate, as he orders his biggest warrior, Yatala, to attack. The Hulk-like giant uses the elephants as stepping stools and launches himself into the air before smashing his mace into the wall and splitting it all the way down. That opens the way for the Kosalan army to charge in behind him, with Yatala clearing the front out. Kosalan's soldiers shoot down enemy archers like flies and set the guard towers ablaze, while the foot soldiers and Yatala slaughter everything in sight. Seeing the chaos unfold, a fat noble runs to the king and urges him to flee, but he refuses to abandon his people. Meanwhile, Siddhartha's wife tells her son, Rahula, that once his father has finished his mission, he will surely come to save them. Outside, Yatala throws soldiers aside and instantly destroys anyone trying to attack the prince with a single blow, before following him deeper into the castle. By sunrise, most of the Shakyan forces are wiped out, and Viradhaka claims victory over. Later that night in the ascetic forest, Asaji tells Siddhartha that he'll die by the next full moon, but Siddhartha finds it hard to believe seeing how healthy the boy looks. Asaji predicts that he will be eaten alive by wolves, but Siddhartha promises to protect him no matter what. Later, when Siddhartha is meditating, Asaji falls off a cliff while trying to steal eggs from a nest, so he rushes down as fast as he can, only to find the boy survived by falling in the bushes. Next, the boy nearly drowns in a river, which makes him panic again, but it turns out to be a harmless scare. Like that, the night of the full moon arrives, and Siddhartha wonders if the boy will really die as he predicted, even after he tied him to a tree. As he meditates, a rabbit crawls up and nibbles on the ropes, and by the time he notices, the boy is already gone. He searches for Asaji everywhere while the rabbit leads the boy through some bushes, after which he falls down a slope and ends up right in front of a pack of hungry baby wolves. Looking at the starved wolf pups, Asaji smiles and pets them, and says that he will fill their bellies soon before lying down in front of them for their parents to come and make a feast out of him. Right after that, Siddhartha catches up and falls just like him, but seeing the wolves tear into his tiny friend leaves him horrified. In a panic, he runs back as fast as his thin legs can carry him and lands face first in the grass, where he breaks down in tears and starts crying loudly. Just then, Depa finds him again and resumes Siddhartha's training more brutally than ever, even setting him on fire at a time. Seeing that he still has some life left, the mad monk ties him to a tree and lets vultures feed on him. But that makes his fellow monks feel so bad they untie him and say he has done enough. Siddhartha refuses to stop even after 10 days without drinking water, which makes Depa believe he has reached the peak of asceticism. After that, Siddhartha begins meditating on a cliff under the burning sun and continues through a stormy night, chanting in his mind that he must become one with his surroundings. One day, the winds blow his thin body into the waterfall, but when he feels nothing, he wonders if he has finally merged with nature, and if this is the peak of asceticism Depa spoke of. However, as he closes his eyes, he finds himself swirling in an unknown realm, where he hears his mother's voice telling him that Asaji's life was meant to teach him the truth that all life is part of a cycle. Hearing that, he feels despair, but she commands him to keep living. After he wakes up, he sees a bowl of soup right in front of his face, and it brings him to tears. At first, he thinks Asaji brought it, but it turns out to be a kind woman from a nearby village. Once he thanks her for saving his life, he walks into the forest, and all the animals follow him as he calls them to gather, sharing the lesson that it is nature's law for one to be consumed for another's survival, like what happened with Asaji and the wolves. But humans are the only ones who consume each other out of greed, and that is the true cause of suffering. At the same time, in the Kosala kingdom, the Shakya king is put on trial where he insists that there is no need for any more violence. But the Kosala prince swears he will never forgive the Shakya people, and that Siddhartha will die by his hand. Back in the forest, Siddhartha is about to leave when Depa stops him and asks if he is really leaving the forest. After Siddhartha confirms it, the man swears he will surpass him in self-torture and prove that asceticism is the truth. But Siddhartha argues that he realized extreme beliefs are pointless, which is why he will now live a balanced life where he walks a middle path between suffering and pleasure. Realizing that Siddhartha has chosen a path of his own, Depa admits defeat. Back at the Kosala border, the Shakyan people are forced into labor until they collapse or are executed daily to satisfy the prince's twisted hatred, while the imprisoned king hears the screams of his people from inside his cell. Meanwhile, the prince's father gets angry one day and demands to know why he had imprisoned his own mother with the Shakya slaves, to which the boy simply says that she is a filthy Shakyan slave too. His father reminds him that she is still his mother, but he argues that making an exception for family would set a bad example. That night, Yatala visits the prince's enslaved mother in prison to bring her food from the celebration, but he accidentally drops the bowl, so he peeks in with his massive head and promises to bring another one. The queen warns him not to come again because she is in the female slaves area. But Yatala becomes angrier and says he will free her because she is the queen, but the lady stops him, saying that would cause more trouble for her son. Then, Yatala asks why the prince locked her up, so she explains that she is guilty of lying about her status when she married. But he still thinks she is a great woman, slave or not. That reminds him of his childhood, when there was a food shortage in his village and his family, including his slave mother, was brutally crushed under an elephant to reduce the number of mouths to feed, and he was left lonely without them. Hearing that, the queen calls him a good son, but warns him again not to be kind to her, as that will make him a target for everyone else. Still, Yatala believes the prince will listen to him. But when he talks to the prince later, in return for bringing food to her, the prince has him lashed while being chained to the ground, and tells him to stop acting like a fool. In frustration, Yatala asks the prince why he locked up his own mother, and he replies that he had to punish her for lying and for carrying filthy Shakya blood in her veins. After the prince insults her further, Yatala becomes furious and breaks his chains before storming out of the castle. Back in his room, the prince remembers how everyone used to joke about him being the son of a filthy Shakyan slave, and how that ridicule pushed him to sacrifice everything in pursuit of power. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by a messenger informing him that they have found Siddhartha. Hearing that, he immediately rides out with an army to hunt him. Once they find the monk, he orders his men to surround Siddhartha and tells him that he made his family suffer, and for that, he will make him pay with his life. After saying that, the boy waits for a reaction, but Siddhartha keeps his cool and tells him to take his life he wants to. Seeing Siddhartha act so calm, the boy declares he will execute everyone he loves, but Siddhartha calmly asks if taking revenge even makes him happy. He then says that his dark thoughts likely keep him up at night, and it hits the prince right where it hurts. Regardless, he decides to swing his sword to claim his head, but just then lightning strikes from the sky and makes him throw the sword away, which lands in front of Siddhartha. The monk picks it up and walks up to the prince with his soul-piercing gaze that scares away all the soldiers surrounding him. Then, Siddhartha says that these dark thoughts are making him suffer more than any torture, and that is what makes his life so pitiful. Hearing that, the prince grabs his sword and retreats in humiliation. Back in his room, he remembers Siddhartha's eyes, and the humiliating loss fuels his hatred even more. Right then, a messenger brings him the terrible news that a plague is tearing through the female slaves and will spread to the palace in no time, so he urges him to decide whether they should burn them all. After seeing the chaos below and giving it some thought, the prince orders him to burn them. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Yatala is enjoying some snacks when he suddenly hears everyone causing a commotion about a fire nearby. Realizing it is coming from the female quarters, he rushes there at full speed while knocking aside every guard who gets in his way. He breaks through the wall and looks everywhere for the queen while ignoring the rising flames. After he finds her, the giant smashes his way out and fights his way to the front gate of the castle, where he smashes a huge hole in the wall and leaves the kingdom for good. Far away in the forest, the queen is pleasantly surprised that Yatala saved her, but Viradhaka follows Yatala and finds them near a pond. At first, Yatala is happy he came to help his mother, but seeing that same look of pity in her eyes makes the prince so angry that he declares that the order to start the fire was his, and then leaves after ordering Yatala to get rid of the woman. Hearing that, Yatala resigns from duty and calls the prince cold-hearted, but his mother tells the giant to calm down and let it go for her sake. Yatala calms down on hearing that and walks away with her in his arms. After a long journey under the scorching sun, he lets her rest under a rock formation where she asks him why he helped her, and he happily replies that she reminds him of his mother. He says that she is a kind lady like her, and that is why he wants her to be his new mother. Hearing that makes her so happy, she asks him to show her his face, and assures him she won't be scared because he is a good boy, which surprises Yatala because everyone called him a monster his whole life. He unties his mask and slowly turns around to show his gentle face, and the queen tells him she will gladly take his mother's place. Thinking about a happy life with his new mother, Yatala becomes really happy and throws his mask away. But after a few days, when he gets back with fruits in his arms, he sees her unconscious and drops everything on the ground. He soon realizes that she has passed away and starts crying out loudly, his screams echoing through the wasteland. After that, he carries her body a long distance to the forest, where he digs her a grave with tears streaming from his face as he gently places her inside. That night, he sleeps hugging her grave, and the next day he starts wandering aimlessly through different lands and cities feeling sad and broken, and unable to sleep at night, just like the prince who's now just as lonely. One night, he finally gives in to despair and jumps down a waterfall, but even that fails to end him, as his monstrous body somehow survives the fall. In agony, he begs the Lord of Thunder to strike him down and end his suffering, but nothing happens at all. Then, he walks through the river until sunset, when he suddenly notices something glowing deep in the forest ahead. There, he finds Siddhartha calmly meditating in silence. He slowly walks closer and drops to his knees in front of him, saying he wishes to die because he is the saddest man in the world. Siddhartha quietly asks why he is unhappy, to which Yatala explains that his real parents were crushed by an elephant, and he lost his second mother to the plague just as fast as he got her. Hearing that, Siddhartha gently replies that it was his parents who were truly unlucky. But Yatala ignores that and angrily asks why the prince who abandoned his own mother was never punished. Siddhartha calmly listens to him and then says that the prince is the one who suffered most because, as a prince whose mother was a slave, he had to act cold the whole time and watch her pass away helplessly, and now he has to live with the blood of thousands and of his own mother on his hands. On the other hand, Prince Viradhaka rushes to his mother's grave and fights some hyenas off it, before frantically digging her out with tears streaming down his face. He hugs her cold body and begs her to say her ungrateful son's name one last time and forgive him, because he had no choice but to be as cold as he had to lead the kingdom without showing any weakness. Back in the forest, Siddhartha softly repeats that there's no doubt that the prince is one of the most unfortunate boys in the kingdom. He continues that, as someone who has known suffering, Yatala should be able to understand others' pain better than anyone else. Hearing all this, the giant feels both sad and angry at the same time, and he holds his head and screams before banging it on the ground in frustration. Then, Siddhartha gently places his warm hand on the giant's shoulder and shares that he also lost his mother shortly after he was born, but because she gave birth to him, he was able to meet him now. He explains that all life has a purpose, and there is a delicate bond between all living creatures. If Yatala hadn't existed, that balance would have been thrown off, and thus, he is important. He says that he is fulfilling his purpose and influencing many lives just by existing. Hearing that his life has value leaves Yatala stunned. Siddhartha reminds him that he saved many people and gives him the example of his real parents when they first saw him. Then he brought happiness to Prince Siddhartha's mother by showing kindness to her, and finally to the prince himself, who can now rest knowing his mother was treated kindly by someone. With tears in his eyes, Yatala asks once more if someone like him is allowed to live on after having the blood of many on his hands, and Siddhartha reassures him that it is fine. Hearing this moves the giant so deeply that he calls Siddhartha a great man and asks to become his disciple. But Siddhartha humbly denies, explaining that he is still a student in training and in the middle of mourning, just like himself. So just like Tada, Yatala begs him to make him his first disciple once his training is finished, and swears he will wait as long as it takes. Then he thanks him for teaching him the true meaning of life and leaves. At that moment, Siddhartha is shocked by everything he said and wonders what exactly came over him in that moment. Just then, the sun starts rising and Siddhartha sees the old man that he once saw in his childhood, surrounded by its glow. The old man tells him that he has been enlightened and gives him the title of Buddha, which means the awakened one. He then tells him that it is his mission to spread his teachings to humanity as long as life exists and teach people how to live. At that moment, the spiritual realm becomes visible to Siddhartha, and a familiar voice explains that people are like lotus flowers at birth, blooming with unlimited potential. But it is a tragedy that so many beautiful flowers are lost in the mud. That is why it is his duty as the Buddha to help those flowers bloom, and Siddhartha gladly accepts the role entrusted to him. Not long after that, Prince Siddhartha releases the Shakyan slaves while Tada, Megala, and the monks continue with their lives. And Siddhartha sets off on a long journey as Buddha to save humanity. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.